Richard Dawkins is back with more new atheist propaganda, it seems. This time it is a movie, a documentary, instead of a book. This new movie is entitled The Root of All Evil. In between this movie and the God Delusion, he came out with another book entitled The Greatest Show on Earth. I must say I was surprised in reading that book by the fact that Richard Dawkins actually made sense in it and gave arguments and quoted respected scholars in context. At least I presume he did, for that was a book about biological evolution as opposed to atheism per se, and I am more or less ignorant of the life sciences. I would say that his conflating of intelligent design and young earth creationism in that book is a bit disturbing, though. But what he's saying in that book, The Greatest Show on Earth, it has the ring of truth to it, very unlike the God Delusion, which was mere uninformed assertion and caricaturization. So it was a refreshing change of pace for Dawkins after the dreadful new atheist book he published, The God Delusion. But now I am afraid he is back in an area which he knows next to nothing about and speaking as an authority on straw men. Faith is the root of all epistemic evil. That is apparently the message Dawkins is bringing forth in his new documentary. The idea is that faith is the antithesis of reason and science. Where does he come up with this stuff? Faith is rather an assent to the evidence and an embracing of the evidence where it leads. We see evidence that Jesus is God, and then we embrace him as our Lord. Faith, let's see, lost my place here. Richard certainly believes in evolution, doesn't he? Well, he has faith, but it is a faith not in lack of evidence or against the evidence, but in accord with the evidence. In the Bible we read, quote, faith is the evidence of things not seen. That's in Hebrews chapter 11. In the New Testament, over and over in the Bible, we see not only the presence, but the command for good apologetics, which is the reason behind our faith, that establishes our faith. Mormons and Muslims have their own apologists as well. So I think apologetics is not unique to Christianity. All religious adherents have their apologists, I think. Even Dawkins is an apologist for what he mistakenly calls atheism. Faith is, I am afraid, not independent or against reason, but built upon it. Why would anybody in their right mind believe something if they could somehow know independently it was not true? This seems to be what Dawkins thinks faith is. But that's not what faith is. Faith is believing what you know is true because you have good reason to know that it's true. But there is a silver lining in Dawkins' black cloud. There are some scenes in the documentary in which Dawkins is actually talking to an intelligent Christian. Apparently these scenes were cut out of the official and final version of the movie, and what does this tell us? But they are available to watch on YouTube. So just search for, I search for Richard Dawkins, Alistair McGrath. That's how I found it. Okay, now get this. Dawkins actually listens to what other people have to say on the matter, Alistair McGrath in this case, on the matter of the existence of God, and attempts to interact intelligently with it. He even dialogues with Alistair McGrath over the problems with the God Delusion. That is, what McGrath criticized in the God Delusion. For example, about God, if we say God explains the design in the world, that raises the larger question of who designed the designer, and McGrath takes him to task for that. Very fundamental theological flaw, and rightly so. And Dawkins is actually talking about it with him. Okay. Now, this is a very different approach from merely guessing on what the other side says and then scoffing at it because obviously nobody as enlightened as Dr. Dawkins has anything intelligible to say about what is obviously false. Obviously false, that is, when it is misrepresented or misunderstood. And Dawkins has said that why take the time to look into what good theology has to say, because theology as a whole is just obviously like fairy tales and leprechauns and unicorns and that kind of stuff. I think Dawkins is to be commended for actually doing what we've all been harping on him to do. He should genuinely be commended for dealing with the arguments on the other side. Though I am concerned that his interview with McGrath did not make the final cut. Giving him the benefit of the doubt, perhaps what he is saying in The Root of All Evil is that some people arbitrarily believe things for no apparent reason, and that leads to a lack of scientific knowledge or rejection of scientific knowledge. But not all religious adherents are in this category. But so what? Somebody misunderstands the Big Bang or evolution? Is that really the end of the world? Is that cause to produce an entire movie about it, which ideally shall gross as much as the book, The God Delusion? Even worse, of course, than mere rejection of science is the possibility that arbitrary blind faith shall lead to war and slaughter. And I suppose this is possible. When one arbitrarily believes in a particular God, they may later arbitrarily believe that God is telling them to massacre others. But most people don't believe arbitrarily, or if they do, then they are insane enough to arbitrarily kill people anyhow, even if they didn't have their particular religious faith. When we look at contemporary religion as it is actually practiced, how much danger is there of faith-based murder? There is some, of course, and it is tragic when it occurs, but it is really not very common when we consider the billions of religious adherents. It is not anywhere near as big a problem as Mr. Dawkins is making it out to be. Which is more likely, to follow a loving and merciful God who demands complete obedience and then murder people, or to believe in no God at all, to not believe in good or bad, and then murder people? I am not suggesting that Richard is a cold-blooded murderer, just that cold-blooded murder is more consistent within an atheistic framework than it is within a God-following framework. So those are just some thoughts about Richard Dawkins since the God Delusion book came out, and some of my critiques of that book. This is an update on that. And I think we're seeing a positive trend here, perhaps. If he's actually willing to reason and think about this stuff, I think it will lead him ultimately to belief in God, because reason always leads to God. It's only when we close our minds to reason, to evidence, to the facts, that we can be skeptical. Thank you. Shalom.